Hi, I'm Alister, Benn, and you're watching Expressive Photography. Thanks very much for tuning in. Today I'm going to answer another question which was put to me by one of our subscribers, Graham Kirkham, who asked the question, what's more important, composition or light? Now, Graham was actually the person who won our A3 print giveaway when we released our new processing videos, creative black and white processing. I offered an A3 print to one of our newsletter subscribers, and Graham was the person who won it. So not only is he getting the print, but we're also going to answer his question as well. Now, if you would like to join me here, this is a selection of 10 images from the Yellow Mountain in eastern China. And the reason I've chosen this location is that it's incredibly weather dependent. You can go there and it's socked in with fog and you literally see nothing, or you can get this incredible light with cloud inversions, and it's just remarkable. And it's a really great place to look at this question, which is more important, composition or light? Now, when you get there and it's full of fog and kind of socked in, this is the best you can hope for at that time. When you can't see anything at all, when the mist starts to clear, you suddenly start seeing the landscape and all of the geometry and angles and rock pinnacles and incongruous trees that kind of hang onto the side of cliffs. Now, because this is in black and white, you would argue that the composition is more important. It's the arrangement of the stuff that we can see. But as I keep banging on in my ebook, Luminosity and Contrast, and the videos that I make, the black and white processing videos, luminosity and contrast are massive engagements. Now, the question is, what's more important, light or composition? It depends what we mean by the word light. Do we mean dramatic light? Do we mean warm light? Do we mean light that works for us? Or is it just all light? Because obviously if you photograph at night, there's very little light, but the camera can soak it all up over long exposures. So the quality of the light isn't explicit, it's just something that we use to our effect. So in this particular image, the luminosity of the fog and the brightness of the fog is light, and I think it contributes to the feel of this image. So in this particular case, you can't disassociate the light from the composition. In this example, as the fog starts to clear more, we start recognizing strong individual graphic elements. Now, I've kept this one in black and white again. The rocks themselves are quite red. There's a lot of red granite. But there was a cool to warm thing going on, and I've stripped it down into black and white again just because I want to focus on luminosity and composition. So there isn't a lot of angularity to the light here. There's not a lot of direction. It's kind of flat and diffused. So it's the graphical nature of the elements that are forming the most important contributing factor to this composition. This strong, jagged pinnacle with the hole in it on the right hand side is the most important subject. The light is not very important. But again, there was light, there was diffused light, but I believe in this case it's the composition again that's driving the engagement. If we stick with the same subject, this one obviously has way nicer color palette to it. There's very little light because it was taken about an hour after sunset, but it's the color of the light, it's the quality of the tonal relationships that is creating this very dramatic and stark composition. Now, if this was taken into black and white, it's going to feel kind of similar, but obviously you lose that emotional trigger. So if we're going to keep this image in color, then obviously it's important that we have the color of the light is becoming significant. We have that cool to warm transition through the mountains and then into the sky. So the quality of the light is becoming a strong factor here, but I think without a very, very solid composition, great light doesn't really mean anything. This is another example where, and I've started to move into color now, is that we have some of the warmth of the rocks. And even though we don't have any light or directional light, we have luminosity with the fog again. And the landscape is kind of playing hide and seek with the clouds. But it's the warmth of the rocks that are breathing life into this. The fog feels cool, the rocks feel slightly warmer. This is about composition again. The quality of the light is diffused and generic. It's not directional at all. So again, I personally feel that this is another image where the composition is driving the engagement, but it's the color of those rocks that are starting to breathe energy into the system. So again, color shouldn't be confused with light. We can have warm light, but it's the light interacting with something else that's creating that warmth. Once we start looking at bigger scenes like this is another example. Now there is some side light in this, that we are starting to get some light. And I think I'll just quickly dive into the develop module here and emphasize that contrast. And you can see quite quickly that we're able to inject a feeling of stronger side light. So once you have a direction of the light, so that in this case the light is hitting some of the rock surfaces but not others, then you are creating strong luminosity differences between the same thing. So you've got some rocks that have got the light on them, other rocks that don't have the light on them. Now, good light can certainly help overcome some compositional deficiencies, but I think if you don't have strong visual relationships between your elements, that all the good light in the world doesn't really help. I like this photograph, and I know myself from being at this location many times. Once that light arrives, your energy levels go up, but at the same time, this hide and seek between the mountains and the trees and the fog is also massively invigorating. So I'm very much an experiential landscape photographer. I'm there to have experiences. And I've been there when it's sucked in fog completely with no light, and I've photographed the bark on trees and, little rock details and stuff. So it doesn't really bother me so much. But obviously this, in terms of engagement for people are looking for, it's easier to engage someone with wow light than with a clever composition. Now, to end this little example, there's one more before I do that. So this is an example here where we've got pretty good light. This was early morning, the sun hadn't quite come up yet. So the light was nice. I mean, we had some nice warmth to the light, but there's not a lot of directionality. And what has happened is that a lot of the mountains, everything's a bit obscured. There's not enough contrast to be able to identify three-dimensionality and things like that, because that's what light really does, is it creates depth. It emphasizes the structure of things. So this is an example, I think, where we've got quite nice temperature of light, but the composition itself to me isn't amazing. I like it, but I'd have to work on this. You'd really have to spend a lot of time to try and make this one work. I'm going to finish with a location. Oh, no, I'm not. One more. Now, right, the reason I've added this one is we've got this beautiful pink light and this very jagged horizon here. Now, superficially, I think the photograph works. We've got this beautiful pink light and this very jagged pinnacled skyline. Now, if we think about how this would work in black and white, as soon as you turn it into black and white, it certainly loses some of that power. It feels like those clouds are a little bit banded and they're a little bit horizontal and they lack energy. Whereas in color, we forgive that. It seems just like a beautiful sunrise. So I think this is an example where the light dominates the composition to a certain extent. This is a very famous location at Yellow Mountain. It's a viewpoint that I've been to many, many times, and I've stood there in all sorts of conditions. And on this particular case, it was very, very flat. I'm going to open up that foreground just so we can kind of see into those pinnacles a little bit better. I'll kind of open it up a bit just so we can see what's going on, because otherwise it's almost invisible. So we're not seeing a huge amount of three-dimensionality in that foreground. It's the light is very obscured. It was very overcast. The sun was kind of popping in and out, but it was very, very flat. Now, there are beautiful parts of this frame. I do love the way the mountains are receding into the fog there in the background. But in terms of what's coming up after this, this image feels just a little bit flat and a little bit uninspiring. When you're there in great light, obviously you get something more like this, where we're seeing this incredible warmth of the foggy light, the diffused nature, the shadows and the beams. It feels just so much more engaging. So in this particular case, comparing it to the one before, the composition is very similar. It's more or less the same subject, but in this case, the light is everything. And there's one more shot taken from the same location. This is another one taken on a different day. And again, the sun was in a place, the conditions were far more harmonious. And there's no doubt about it that the light in this composition makes it. Now, in terms of answering the question, which is more important, the light or the composition, I think in big landscapes like this, big expansive landscapes, if you don't have directional light, everything can get a little bit flat and a little bit low contrast, and therefore big landscapes are hard to isolate. You know, they're hard for the brain to kind of work out what you're supposed to be looking at. Once you have strong directional light, in particular warm golden hour light, you have this contrast between cool shadows and warm highlights. The big landscape gets simplified and stripped down to areas of higher contrast, lower contrast, diffusion. We have transitions with depth and the three-dimensionality. So light in big landscapes, I think, is really, really important. I think the more that we isolate, you can isolate things that don't require great light, or you can isolate things that work great in good light. So the answer really is that you have to ask the question, what am I responding to? Is this a visual relationship that is just geometry or atmosphere, for example? Or is it the way the light is interacting with the subject? I personally don't need great light to go out and have a good time in the landscape. And I would urge you to open your mind to being out in the landscape and not fixating about, oh, there's no clouds, or the light is harsh, or it's not a very nice temperature, or whatever. So I think the more we go into the landscape with degrees of expectation and degrees of judgment, the more unhappy times we're going to have out in the field. And I've been to Yellow Mountain where it's been socked in with fog. I've been there in blizzards. I've been there in the pouring rain. I've been there in amazing light, and I've been there in flat light. I've photographed under the moon, you name it. I've been there and done it. And under most circumstances, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And the hardest thing to deal with is expectations that aren't being realized. So what I would say is that composition is extraordinarily important. I think you can have amazing light and point your camera at something that doesn't work particularly as a photograph, or it totally relies upon the great light to basically raise the game of a rather poor subject. And those photographs tend not to be terribly satisfying. So for me, hopefully some of these images will have inspired you somewhat, but for now we can make a close to this video for today. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope it's been of some value to you. Tune in tomorrow when I'm going to be looking at another question from a viewer, which is basically, why do I focus so much on small scenes these days instead of grand landscapes? I jokingly said that I gave up shooting grand landscapes because I couldn't be as good as Mark Adamus. So the person is asking whether that is the only reason or whether there are better reasons than that. So tomorrow we'll be looking at the difference between small scenes versus grand landscapes, and whether that is some form of evolution as an artist or whether it's just a personal choice. So thanks for watching. Please click the subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. It's really helpful. And I will see you tomorrow for another question on expressive photography.